Welcome to my fellow sort of panelists here. Content is one of those sorts of things that I think, you know, a bit like everything in marketing, everyone's got an opinion. In our sort of collective experiences, you know, I think there must be 1,001 stories around sort of things that have worked and things that haven't worked. Maybe I could ask Simonetta that, you know, some of the things that you've seen yourself in your own business career about stuff that's kind of worked. And one of the questions I always used to ask my teams whenever I had an opportunity was, why did it work? And some people just tell me that that's the numbers, and, you know, trying to figure out why it was quite difficult.
And what did it work for?
Yeah,
right.
That's perfect.
I guess my my most insightful experience as a business person using content has been our successes in social media. We, in my last role at Western Union, have a hugely widespread customer base, people across 200 countries, and people of ranging demographics. And we have an existing traditional customer base and a new customer base that we're trying to attract, people who are younger, more digital. And we found that actually we had a very high concentration of those on our social channels. So we developed a whole content strategy to bring more of them to follow us, to get them to engage with us, and to get them to amplify and share our content, because our objective was fundamentally help the brand reposition itself from a legacy brand to a modern fintech brand. So what we did was a strategy that was deliberately what we call the 70-30. 70% of what we posted on social media had nothing to do with our products or services. It was to do with what customers were talking about. And they were talking about the food from the places they were originally. They were talking about landmarks, they were talking about travel, they were talking about, you know, the knocks in life and in the moment of the people who are close to you in those moments. And so we actually created lots of content around that, whether it was static or short clips. And towards the end of my remit, we also engaged social media influencers that represented an aspiration for these customers. And so the results we had, and I deliberately said, what did it work towards, were fundamentally related to our brand health and our brand metrics. So we had, when we ran these campaigns, we had sentiment of 98%. Our brand sentiment had a big increase and improvement. And we were able to grow our follower base very fast, and 25% a year every year, and had engagement rates of 14 to 15% regularly. So did we ever prove, did we get to the point that we were able to prove what this was doing for our retention or for our acquisition? No, just by the very virtue of the fact that we were dealing with a thin and wide target audience, and therefore couldn't then go deep in each country to do the analysis that would be needed. But we would eventually, I'm sure that the team will be getting there as well.
No, of course. But Jason, you have the kind of ability to come from a platform's point of view. And what do you see out there that you think kind of is worth doing? I mean, who's getting it right?
Well, I think, you know, Samantha touched on it. I think it's about building an audience. So content marketing is about building an audience. We talk about, I think I see a lot of frustration in, oh, but I put this content out there and engagement's low. But you have to look at it from a standpoint. Did you build that audience? Have you built that audience? I come from Marketo. I worked at Marketo for a couple of years, and I reported to John Miller, who's the co-founder, no relation. I love John. He taught me a tremendous amount about marketing. But there's a quote that sticks with me to this day, and he said, before we wrote our first line of code, we wrote our first blog post. And he was basically, you know, building that audience, answering questions, joining the conversation, being part of this conversation, and tailoring the product which would come later to that audience. Now that's a startup approach to content. But I think when you look at enterprise, it works as well. What conversation do you want to own? How do you get, you know, thought leadership and content together? It gets you shortlisted onto into the for the sales point of view. So I think it's if you're not doing content marketing, you're simply missing opportunities to grow to build an audience, to own a conversation, to build authority over time. And does that directly tie back to revenue? Absolutely it does. The tech stack is out there, the marketing tech stack is out there to measure different touch points and tie it back to actual revenue, pipeline revenue, whichever you're measuring. So there's no question about what type of content you should be creating, why you should be creating it, and the results that it drives.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think interestingly for me, having spent some time working at HSBC, a lot of our business-to-business stuff was a very rich kind of seam for the time I was there. But you, Bonnie, have obviously at EY a big business-to-business kind of aspect to it. How do you guys manage it, and what works for you guys? How are you finding the kind of process of this sort of, actually, I suppose, demand in volume terms that you've got to get out there?
Yeah, I mean, it is demand and volumes, and I think it's being really clear what your priorities are and actually focusing your content on your strategic priorities. So less around trying to get mass communications out there, but really focusing on the few messages and consistently sort of conveying them. I think as well, what we're seeing a big shift, which is what B2C do really well, is about creating that emotional connection with your end consumer. And I think B2B enterprise marketing has to start to create, and is creating that emotional connection with the end user.
Right.
And I think, you know, it's about using all your channels to market and actually adapting it. So, you know, whether it's your employees and use of social media, the channels that you use, you know, the human contact, you know, that's sort of second for none. So using as well your employees, that enables them to grow their personal brand, as well as you reach new audiences. Rise of video, so less around, you know, 20-page reports that might have been the sort of what you'd create five years ago, but more sort of sound bites of videos and infographics, and using new channels and techniques to reach them.
They're always coming, aren't they? So from your point of view, Belinda, you know, the Aegis kind of world and the kind of media sort of side of things.
The publicist world. But I think, you know, we've set up a content practice to really kind of serve all our clients. And I think our kind of philosophy is around really making sure we're building content with purpose.
Yeah.
Would be the first thing. The second thing is making sure that it's really data driven. It's based on what people really want from content. And then I think the third thing is really understanding, you know, the role of content through the customer journey. I think those are the kind of three success ingredients to make great content. You know, we do a lot of auditing of what, you know, clients are doing within their organisation around content, and we often do the analytics, and we show them that, you know, there is a hell of a lot of volume of content produced within an organisation, but 90% of it is actually not doing anything, and that's because people are making it without purpose, not really looking at the data around what audiences actually want to get against content, and also the role of that content. And I think, you know, content can be very inspirational and engaging, but also obviously really driving down to sales. But we have, you know, many great examples, whether it's REI, which is an outdoor company, who's a retailer in the US, you know, where we've built, you know, inspirational films about getting outdoors, but we carry that through right down to obviously converting the product in the end. But we're making sure we think about what's our content marketing strategy across the whole piece, not just parts of it.